Hello, everyone. This is Terry with God's Tender Mercies. I'd love if you would like, subscribe, and share this video. It helps us to spread the good news that God is in the details of our lives. Today's episode is about money. I have never met a person who did not at one time or another have worries over finances. When Adam and Eve left the Garden of Eden, they learned to bring forth food by the sweat of their brow. I feel money concerns are one of the noxious weeds that afflict and torment our hearts here in the latter-day lone and dreary world. Submitting to God financially is one of the clearest ways to test your heart, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Thankfully, the Lord graciously shows forth His tender mercies to us as we walk the path of sacrifice and ultimately consecration in all areas of our lives. My first story describes a stepping stone along my path of learning to recognize God's tender mercies. In 1990, I was 30 years old. I had 4 little girls, ages 8, 6, 4, and 1. And my husband was working as an auto technician in his own shop. And he was working in conjunction with an auto parts store. And one of the other owners worked well with my husband, and we thought this was a good opportunity for growth. But unfortunately, this man's father-in-law did not want to stay in the business, and it just wasn't viable to keep it open without his contribution. So we had to close that. Well, what made matters worse was that this father-in-law claimed that my husband and I owed him $2,000. And I think $2,000 is still a lot of money today, but can you imagine what it meant to our little family in 1990? And so this was a big worry for us. Fortunately, the government of Canada, where we were living at the time, modified a tax policy, and we received an unexpected check. And you guessed it, it was for almost the exact amount that we needed. So, tender mercy, problem solved. Lord solved our problem. Kind of. I unfortunately did not see it that way at first. And I became resentful about the way that I would have to spend this check on this debt that I did not believe we owed, instead of something else for the family. So I wanted to spend that check in many other different ways. I wanted to get a new bathroom. Maybe we could have a vacation, put some away for a rainy day. Many other ways that I wanted to spend that money. And after I got over that and remembered how panicked I was when we owed them $2,000 and didn't have a hope of paying it back, and he was maybe going to sue us over it. So when I remembered that, I saw the tender mercy for what it so clearly was, and I was filled with gratitude, and we paid the debt. So years later, I was looking through a journal, looking for another episode of something, and I ran across the thoughts and worries and feelings I'd had about that $2,000 check. And to my surprise, I had forgotten all about it. Something that had been a point of worry and concern and prayers in our family for months, I had no memory of it. And so I have a couple of takeaways from that. One, it's always better to just accept the blessing that the Lord has given, to recognize it when it comes, and not stew about what else He could spend the money or what else could have happened. The Lord has our back, even if we don't get a new bathroom, but He has more important things and different ways to take care of us. And the second takeaway I got is that the big worry of today will one day seem small. This too shall pass. And so when I get too concerned about things going on in my life now, I think about that $2,000 check. Today's second story comes from church history. I am so fortunate that when I joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints at age 17, the missionaries introduced me to marvelous church history stories right away. One of the books I learned from was The Life of Heber C. Kimball, written by his grandson, Apostle Orson F. Whitney. Heber C. Kimball was one of the original 12 apostles of this dispensation and a true and loyal companion to both Joseph Smith and Brigham Young. And boy, does Heber have stories and tender mercies to tell. I want to share an excerpt from his journal from 1839. The story begins in the early days of the Saints settling Nauvoo, Illinois, after having been driven out of the state of Missouri. The area was marshy and mosquitoes carried the disease we call malaria. The people of that day called it ague, or the chills. Their fever would be so high they would sweat and shake in recurring bouts of the chills. In 1839, Heber and Brigham Young left their faithful families in Nauvoo for a pivotal mission to the British Isles. They were so sick. Their families were so sick. We really need to appreciate how dire their circumstances were. Plus, the Lord had told them to preach the gospel without purse or scrip, meaning they just launched out on the journey, relying on the goodness of others and their faith in God. It would take a much longer video to describe the harrowing adventures Heber and Brigham went through, including a poisoning by a drunk doctor, but I do want to share one of their tender mercies that occurred as they traveled by stagecoach for 400 miles from Pleasant Garden, Indiana to Kirtland, Ohio. Here are the details from Heber C. Kimball's journal from October 27th, 1839. The next morning we took stage and started on our way toward Kirtland. While in Pleasant Garden, we obtained some money. So we had $13.50. When we got into the stage, we did not expect to ride many miles. We rode as far as Indianapolis, paid our passage, and found we had sufficient means to carry us to Richmond, Indiana. When we arrived at Richmond, we found we had means to take us to Dayton, to which we proceeded and tarried overnight, waiting for another line of stages. We expected to stop here and preach until we got means to pursue our journey. Brother Brigham went to his trunk to get money to pay the bill and found he had sufficient to pay our passages to Columbus, to which place we took passage in the stage and tarried overnight. When he paid the bill, he found he had sufficient means to pay our passage to Worcester. We tarried till the after part of the day and then took passage to Worcester. When we arrived there, Brother Brigham went to his trunk again to get money to pay our bill and found sufficient to pay our passages to Cleveland. From Cleveland, we proceeded to Kirtland and arrived the same evening. Brother Brigham had 1 York shilling left, and on looking over our expenses, we found we had paid out over $87 out of the $13.50 we had at Pleasant Garden, which is all the money we had to pay our passages with. We traveled over 400 miles by stage, for which we paid 8 to 10 cents a mile and had eaten 3 meals a day, for each of which we were charged 50 cents. also 50 cents for our lodgings. Brother Brigham often suspected that I put the money in his trunk or clothes, thinking that I had a purse of money which I had not acquainted him with. But this was not so. The money could only have been put in his trunk by some heavenly messenger, who thus administered to our necessities daily as he knew we needed. Isn't that a great story? It's a wonderful example of how most of the time the Lord's financial blessings to us come like manna, one day or one step at a time. After all, the Lord could have had the heavenly messenger put $87 in Brigham's purse and been done with it. But that's not the way the Lord usually works. Yes, sometimes He sends us a $2,000 check when we are really in dire straits. But most of the time, it's fresh manna every day. And both types of tender mercies build our faith and trust in Him. Remember 1 Nephi 1, verse 20. I will show unto you that the tender mercies of the Lord are over all those whom He hath chosen, because of their faith, to make them mighty even unto the power of deliverance. Believe me, the Lord has delivered me financially many, many times, and I praise Him for it. I hope this episode has brought to your mind a tender mercy from the Lord, and I'd love to hear it. Please email me at godstendermercies100@gmail.com or put it in the comments. Like this video if you liked it, and share it with your friends. And of course, subscribe if you haven't already. We'll see you next time.